नचारि जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय गोपीचन वल्लभा गिरिवरदारी जय गोपीचन वल्लभा गिरिवरदारी यशोदनंदन व्रजजन रंजन यशोदनंदन व्रजजन रंजन यमुनतीरा वनचारि यमुनतीरा वनचारि जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा शील प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा शील प्रभुपादा एवं विष्णुपाद परमहंस प्रभुव्यक्ष स्तोत्र सदस्य श्रीमती स्वयं शेष भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी शील प्रभुपाद की जय। इस्कॉन संस्थापक शील प्रभुपाद की जय। एवं विष्णुपाद परमहंस प्रभुव्यक्ष स्तोत्र सदस्य श्रीमती भक्तिवेदांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी महाराज प्रभुपाद की जय। एवं विष्णुपाद लखन किशोर दास बाबू महाराज की जय। एवं विष्णुपाद सच्चिदानंद शील भक्तिविनोद ठाकुर की जय। एवं विष्णुपाद वैष्णव सार्वभौम श्री जगन्नाथ दास बाबू महाराज की जय। जय श्री रूप सनातन भट्ट रघुनाथ जीव गोपाल भट्टदास रघुनाथ गोस्वामी प्रभु की जय। नमाचार्य श्री हरिदास ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से घोषी कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री द्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण को गोपनाथ श्याम को राधा कुंड के गोवर्धन की जय। श्री श्री गौरांगी ब्रह्मगौरीश्वर भगवान की जय। श्री मायापुर धाम की जय। श्री वृंदावन धाम की जय। गंगामाई की जय। अमन माई की जय। भक्ति देव की जय। तुलसी देव की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव की जय। श्री हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद भागवतम की जय। इस्कॉन वर्तमान गुरुवृंद की जय। समावेद भक्तवृंद की जय। गौर प्रेमानंद हरि बोल। All glories to their symbol. All glories to the assembly. All glories to the assembly. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam. Devim Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jayamudire. Nishtaprayeshu apatreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya. Bhagavati uttama sloke bhaktir bhavati naishtivi. Hare Krishna, welcome you all to the Friday morning Srimad Bhagavatam class. Today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 29, text 43 to 45. First we'll read text 43. Namo dadati shvashatam padam yanniyamad adaha lokam swadeham tanute mahan saptabir apratam. Namo dadati shvashatam padam yam niyamad adaha lokam swadeham tanute mahan saptabir apratam. Namo dadati shvashatam padam yan niyamad adaha lokam swadeham tanute mahan saptabir apratam. Translation Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Subject to the control of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the sky allows outer space to accommodate all the various planets which hold innumerable living entities. The total universal body expands with its 7 coverings under his supreme control. It is understood from this verse that all the planets in outer space are floating and they all hold living entities. The word Svashatam means those who breathe or the living entities. In order to accommodate them, there are innumerable planets. Every planet is a residence for innumerable living entities, and the necessary space is provided in the sky by the supreme order of the Lord. It is also stated here that the total universal body is increasing. It is covered by 7 layers, and as there are 5 elements within the universe, so the total elements in layers cover the outside of the universal body. The first layer is of earth, and it is 10 times greater in size than the space within the universe. The second layer is water, and that is 10 times greater than the earthly layer. The third covering is fire, which is 10 times greater than the water covering. In this way, each layer is 10 times greater than the previous one. Text 44. Guna abhimanino devaha sargadishvasya yadbhayat vartante nuyugam yesham vasha etacharacharam. Translation Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Out of fear of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the directing demigods in charge of the modes of material nature carry out the functions of creation, maintenance, and destruction. Everything animate and inanimate within this material world is under their control. The 3 modes of material The 3 modes of material nature, namely goodness, passion, and ignorance, are under the control of the 3 deities, Brahma, Vishnu, and Lord Shiva. Lord Vishnu is in charge of the mode of goodness, Lord Brahma is in charge of the mode of passion, and Lord Shiva is in charge of the mode of ignorance. Similarly, there are many other demigods in charge of the air department, the water department, the cloud department, etc. Just as the government has many different departments, so within this material world, the government of the Supreme Lord has many departments, and all these departments function in proper order out of fear of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Demigods are undoubtedly controlling all matter, animate and inanimate, within the universe. But above them, the supreme controller is the personality of Godhead. Therefore, in the Brahma Samhita, it is said, Ishvaraha Parama Krishna. Undoubtedly, there are many controllers in the departmental management of this universe. But the supreme controller is Krishna. There are 2 kinds of dissolutions. One kind of dissolution takes place when Brahma goes to sleep during his night, and the final dissolution takes place when Brahma dies. As long as Brahma does not die, creation, maintenance, and destruction are actuated by different demigods under the superintendence of the Supreme Lord. Text 45. Sonantonta karahakalo nadir adikrit abhyaya janam janena janaihan Marayan Mrityunantakam. Translation Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The eternal time factor has no beginning and no end. It is the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the maker of the criminal world. It brings about the end of the phenomenal world. It carries on the work of creation by bringing one individual into existence from one another, and likewise it dissolves the universe by destroying even the Lord of Death, Yamaraj. Purport Srila Prabhupada ki jai. By the influence of eternal time, which is the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Father begets a Son, and the Father dies by the influence of cruel death. But by time's influence, even the Lord of cruel death is killed. In other words, all the demigods within the material world are temporary, like ourselves. Our lives last for 100 years at the most, and similarly, although their lives may last for millions and billions of years, the demigods are not eternal. No one can live within this material world eternally. The phenomenal world is created, maintained, and destroyed by the finger signal of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, a devotee does not desire anything in this material world. A devotee desires only to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This servitude exists eternally. The Lord exists eternally. His servitor exists eternally. And the service exists eternally. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purport of the third canto, 29th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Explanation of Devotion Service by Lord Kapila. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakata Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuddhapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagarjatam Sagana Regula Tanditam Tam Sivam Satvaitam Savadutam Parijana Satam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha ये कृष्णा करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधो जगतपति गोपीशा गोपिका कांता राधा कांता नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी पुष्पानुष्टे देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिय पंचकल्पतरुभ्यश्च वासुदेव पतितानां पावने वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवसादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे मोहं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयति यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरुं दयातारणं परमानन्दमाधवं श्री चैतन्येश्वरम्. Hare Krishna. So here in these three verses that we are discussing today, in the first verse, Lord Kapila is explaining to his mother Devoti as to how, under the control of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the sky accommodates so many various planets, and in each of these planets there are innumerable living entities, and the total universe is covered by what is called 7 coverings under his supreme control. So it is generally called the total universe is generally called universal covering or a universal layer. We'll go into these details a little bit. This universe is actually divided into 14 planetary systems. 7 planetary systems are called Bohr. One second, somebody is listening. So this universe, is divided into 14 planetary systems. 7 planetary systems called Bhuvar, Swar, Mahar, Janas, Tapas, and Satyaloka. These are all in the upward planetary systems, one above the other. Then there are also 7 planetary systems downward, known as Atala, Vitala, Sutala, Talatala, Mahatala, Rasatala, and Patala, gradually one below the other. So this is how 14 planetary systems are there, classified in the whole universe. And this universe is also the smallest of the universe. And there are n number of universes that are existing in this material manifestation. And further descriptions are like all these innumerable universes are floating in the causal ocean, and in each of them, the Lord is represented as the Virat Rupa or the universal form. And the Lord is there with these universes, the suns, moons, heavenly demigods, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, all of them are situated as part of the inconceivable potency of the Lord Krishna. There is an explanation in the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, also, as mentioned here also, that the universal egg, it is called a universal covering or a universal egg because in the shape of an egg. The whole universe is like a shape of an egg, and it is called the manifestation of material energy because there are two energies, material energy and spiritual energy. Spiritual energy is that which is in the spiritual planets, and this material manifestation is done by material energy. So its layers are like earth, water, fire, air, ether, ego, and Mahatattva. And each layer is 10 times in thickness, one above the other. So, for example, if the first layer is earth, then the next layer is water. So, the layer of water covering is about 10 times bigger than the covering of earth. So, in this way, uh, the whole universe is covered in 7 layers. And within this egg, the universal egg, is the universal form of Lord Hari, uh, and on whose body these 14 planetary systems are parts and parcels. So in that there is an example given as to how the all these different planetary situations, the 14 planetary systems are compared to the parts of his body. So there's a mention in the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam as to how the lowest planetary system, that is the Patala, is considered to be the soul of the Supreme Lord, compared to the soul of the Supreme Lord of the universal form. The earth is considered to be his belly, and then Brahmaloka, the highest planetary system where Lord Brahma resides, is considered to be the head of the Lord. Now, why this universal form? Because those who cannot directly engage in the worship of this transcendental form of the Lord, because the Lord's form is transcendental, as I mentioned before, consisting of Satchidananda Vigraha, that is eternal bliss and knowledge. We can't conceptualize with our material vision the spiritual form of the Lord or transcendental form of the Lord. So, in order, particularly for the beginners, to understand something about the worship of the Lord, it is mentioned that the universal form of the Lord is recommended for meditation so that they understand that there is a form of the Lord and these 14 planetary systems are situated within the body of the Lord. So, for the beginners, it is recommended that they worship the deity, worship the deities in the temple, so they can understand that the Lord has got a form. Also, there is a mention as to how there are different forms of living entities with different dresses offered by the external energy of the Lord called Maya, according to the modes of nature that the living entity desires to enjoy. The three modes are goodness, passion, and ignorance. So, even in the material nature, there is a chance of an independent choice by the living entity, and he can choose according to his own self in which mode to be placed, whether it is goodness or passion or ignorance. Depending upon the mode that one prefers to be in, so many different bodies are there. For example, it is said that there are 11 lakh types of worms and reptiles, 10 lakh forms of birds, and all those flying insects. So, altogether, there are 84 lakh species of life in all these different planets of the universe, and the living entity keeps traveling or migrating from one to the other depending upon what is the mode or what is the desire he has got. Even in one particular body, the body keeps, the living entity goes through from childhood and so forth to youth and to old age and finally death. So this way, the living entity transmigrates from one body to the other, and the material energy called Maya of the Lord supplies a living entity the type of form by which he can enjoy his desires to the fullest extent. We all have desires. So the way we have developed desires, the Lord awards us a body to enjoy those desires. At the same time, now the example given is a tiger. A tiger wanted to eat wanted to enjoy the blood of another animal. So therefore, by the grace of the Lord, it has got a body by which he can eat the other animal. He has got claws by which he can kill the animal and then eat also. So similarly, it is said in the Shastra, Jivo Jivasya Jivanam. That means one living entity is a means of sustenance for the other living entities. So everyone is living, sustaining on the other living entity. Now, the human form of life is very crucial to understand because it is in human being that one has to surpass, go above the stages of animal life, of eating, mating, depending, and sleeping. So the Lord is so kind and merciful that whatever desires we have, provided we have a capacity to deserve also, the Lord offers these material bodies. It is example is given like a living entity dreaming of a golden mountain. Mountain is there, gold is there, but there is no such a thing as golden mountain. So out of a desire, someone might see in a dream of a golden mountain, but actually it is non-existent. So similarly, all our desires to enjoy happiness in this material world is like an illusion. Now, all these living entities are governed by the law of karma. And this is from the second sloka. And there are something like 33 crore demigods who are overseeing the operations in this material world, of which three are very prominent. There is goodness, passion, and ignorance. These three modes, three are very prominent. In the sense, the mode of passion, particularly Lord Brahma, requires a lot of creation, requires a lot of passion. So Lord Brahma is entrusted the responsibility of ignorance, and Lord Shiva is in the mode of ignorance. So as Brahma, he creates, as Lord Vishnu, he maintains, and as Lord Shiva, he annihilates the entire material manifestation. Now, all these living entities that are there, all, all of them are provided for their sustenance. It is not that some are hungry or some are starving. Artificially, we might see that newspapers and articles might carry an article say that there's a lot of starvation in one country, there's plenty abundant in other country. So even in that, one gets a birth in a poor country due to the laws of karma, and one gets a birth in an opulent place, dependent on his karma. So, but in the human form of life, they are provided with ample grains, vegetables, fruits, milk products, etc., by the grace of the Lord. And it is only the human form of life that one can understand that the entire creation, maintenance, everything is done by the Lord Himself through His agencies. The Lord does not do anything directly. So, as a matter of gratitude, one should feel highly obliged to the Lord for the supply of foodstuff, and they must first offer food in sacrifice to the Lord and then partake of the remnants. Because Lord is providing everything. There is nothing we can do of our own. If everything has to happen on our will, everything will be in will take place based on our desire. For example, I desire to have a sweet. So at the moment, if I desire, I should immediately have it. But it is not happening. Sometimes someone might end up cooking a sweet which may not be tasty also. So everything is controlled by the Lord, and this control takes place through these 33 crore demigods. Someone is in charge of earth, someone is in charge of water, someone is in charge of air, someone is in charge of the various limbs of the body. For our example, our mind, our head, our intelligence, our bodily limbs, or each and every part of the limb of the body is governed by one demigod. So this way, in the whole material manifestation, there are 33 crore demigods looking after each of the function of the material manifestation. And Lord Brahma is supposed to be the most exalted personality in this universe because of his costless devotional service unto the Lord in mature transcendental knowledge. So, Lord Brahma is the most intelligent person in this universe. Only because of that, he is able to create this universe because it requires a lot of intelligence, it requires a lot of passion also. So, therefore, he created all these 14 planetary systems for inhibition by the different types of living entities. Now, the Lord is full with all the qualities that we see. Being a part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, the conditioned souls in this material world also reflect a part of these qualities, a minute part, and therefore they are also called sometimes called as Patibimbas. So these Patibimba living entities, as part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, have inherited different proportions of his original qualities. And in terms of these qualities, they appear as different species of life and are accommodated in different planets according to the plan of Brahma. So Brahma does a lot of planning in terms of how to accommodate which living entity in which planet, in which form, depending on his karma and what qualities they have developed, depending on the modes of nature that they are placed in. So Brahma has got a lot of responsibility. So that is why sometimes, generally, Brahma's position is given to the most intelligent person in the universe. But it so happens that sometimes Brahma, if there is no such suitable candidate, the Lord Himself, as the Supreme Lord, takes charge of that position and handles the responsibility. So many times you might find even in companies, there might not be a suitable candidate for a responsible position, but then the owner himself or the senior most person might take charge for some time. But similarly, the Lord, as the Supreme Lord, takes the position of Lord Brahma if there is no suitable candidate available. So these 14 planetary systems are called lower planetary systems, middle and upper planetary systems. Now, these demigods, they are also living entities like us, but they have a desire to enjoy something in this material world. Plus, they are also performing devotional service. So the Lord, in order to fulfill their desire, gives them a position of a demigod. And the lifespan in the heavenly planets is much longer, some millions of years, some billions of years. For example, it is said that one day of Brahma is equal to thousands of yugas, and each yuga consists of 43 lakh years. So Brahma has a day of 1000 times these 43 lakh years, and a night of 43 lakh years, and this way it is multiplied by 12 into 365 into 100. So we can imagine what must be the lifespan of Brahma, which is millions and millions of years. But the point is that ultimately one day Brahma also has to leave his body, he has to die. So, according to Vedic Shastras, the inhabitants of the higher planetary system, the residents in the higher planetary systems, live for about 10,000 years or more. Just as Brahma's life is calculated, such a huge lifespan we can't even explain. One day of our planet, our earthly planet is equal to, sorry, one day of Brahma is equal to 6 months of uh, our lifespan in this earthly planet. So from this we can understand what must be the lifespan of Brahma or the living entities in the higher planetary systems. Now, one thing is, after reaching the Brahma Loka is also called Satya Loka. A devotee sometimes, Brahma Loka is also a part of this material world. So sometimes it can happen, even after reaching there, uh, demigods normally get these positions because of some pious activities and some devotional service, and of course, some desire to enjoy. So after their results of the pious activities are over, they also have to come down to this earthly planet to take birth again here in the earth. But sometimes it so happens that once they reach the Satyaloka, many times they are given an opportunity to practice devotion service. And then if somebody is able to utilize it successfully, then they have a proper opportunity to cross the last universal layer called ethereal layer and then enter the spiritual planets. So one can attain perfection in spiritual life even after reaching the Satyaloka. But then generally it does not happen because we see that uh, many times when we go and preach to some rich people, they are not interested because they are satisfied with whatever opulence they have. They don't want to even understand the purpose of human form of life. Many become atheistic also. So this way, many times even demigods also, they are very comfortable. They, because in the heavenly planets the life standard is very very high, so they are very comfortable and they don't. After attaining that position, devotional service is not a priority for them. But Lord gives a facility. If someone takes it up, it is their fortune. Then one might progress from one planetary system to the higher and higher and higher, finally reach Satyaloka. And still, if somebody is very, very determined in practicing the devotion service, they will cross Satyaloka and reach the spiritual planet, Vaikuntha planets also, where there is no birth, there is no death, there is no old age, and there is no disease also. Now, the water that serves as a covering for the universe is called the causal ocean. And the water of this causal ocean is spiritual. A few things I will skip. Heat produces the smell of the aroma of the earth, and the gross earth is produced by such aroma. So all these combined together constitute the cosmic phenomenon. This is given in little detail in the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. At the beginning, we are in the second part of the third canto. This was covered in the first part. So it is said that the extent of this cosmic phenomenon is calculated to be diametrically 4 billion miles. So diameter of this earth, the entire cosmic manifestation is supposed to be something like 4 billion miles. Then the covering of the universe begins. And the first covering is suppose calculated to some extent, something like 40 billion miles. And the subsequent coverings keep on increasing and increasing. But a fearless devotee is one who penetrates each and every of these planetary systems and finally acquires a spiritual identity in one of the Vaikuntha planets. This is a perfection of form of life, the human form of life onwards. Because beyond, after reaching Vaikuntha planets, there is nothing beyond that. So, the sixth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, there is a mention as to how a conditioned whole soul thinks that he is working very hard and then no one can see his sinful activities. But from the Shastras, it is mentioned in the sixth canto that so many witnesses, including the sun, fire, sky, air, moon, the demigods, evening, day, night, directions, water, land, and above all, the super soul himself, who is situated by the side of the individual soul within his heart. So there are so many witnesses who witness all our activities that we perform in one particular form of life. Not only us, every living entity, the super soul accompanies as the super soul. So in every form of life, there is in the material world, there is one individual soul, and by the side is a super soul who observes every activity of the uh, living entity in terms of mind, words, and thoughts and deeds and actions also. So there is no dearth of witnesses apart from the super soul, like sun, moon, everybody. So there are so many witnesses who observe these activities, and finally, the uh, living entities are given the form of life based on their karma and their desire. So many times there are chances for the living entities to enter into hellish planets also. But all these activities, they are perfectly managed by the demigods, because we are all coming under the control of the demigods, and the demigods are under the control of the Supreme Lord. And they are also afraid. Brahma is also fearful of death. So therefore he performs devotional service. Similarly, all the demigods also, because they don't have an old age like us, but at one point of time, the next moment they are supposed to die. So it's in a moment they die without getting into old age or disease. This is the condition of life in the heavenly planets. But still, each and everyone is afraid of their position as a demigod also. In the scripture, there are so many examples as to how Indra is one who becomes very, very envious of someone who performs a lot of austerities in this material world. Because he feels that if somebody is performing a lot of austerities, he might take the position of Indra. So Indra is always envious. So similarly, all the demigods are also afraid of their position, of holding their position. Sometimes they have to give up, and sometimes they have to fall, sometimes they may go up. So there is a nice quote in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, which says that this Garbhodakasai Vishnu, actually there are three Vishnus. We all know just one Vishnu, but the Lord as Vishnu, Mahavishnu, is also a manifestation from the original personality of Godhead. That means the Lord expands as Balarama. From Balarama, he expands his quadruple expansion as Vasudeva, Sankrishna, Pradyumna, Aniruddha. Then again from Sankrishna, there is one more manifestation of quadruple expansion, Vasudeva, Sankrishna, Pradyumna, Aniruddha. And from that second Sankrishna, the Lord expands as Sri Mahavishnu. Now again, from Sri Mahavishnu, the Lord expands as Garbhodakasai Vishnu. And actually from the breathing of, from the exhaling of the breathing of Lord Mahavishnu, innumerable bubbles come out, and each and every bubble is a universe. And some are million times bigger than the smaller ones that we have. That this earth is the small, this universe is the smallest. The universe is millions of times bigger than this universe. And each and every bubble is like a universe. And each of them have got different living entities, demigods, and so many other forms of life. So it is mentioned as to how the Lord as Sri Mahavishnu, on the first Purusha, after creating innumerable universes in the cosmic manifestation, enters into each of the universe as Garbhodakasai Vishnu. So the Lord enters as Garbhodakasai Vishnu, and as we will see here in the first filled half of the universe with water from his own perspiration, and he lied down on the same water. So that is why this water is called Garbhodaka water. Then from his navel comes out a stem of a lotus flower which sprouts, and on that flower petals, Lord Brahma takes birth. So this is a perfect engineering of the Supreme Lord himself. So Brahma then becomes the engineer of the universe, and the Lord takes care of maintenance. And finally, when the time comes for dissolution, Lord Shiva takes care of dissolution. And in this sloka, there is mention of how there are two kinds of dissolution. One is when Brahma goes to sleep, and the final dissolution is when Brahma leaves his body, when he also has to die at the end of his 100 years of life. So from Brahma, Lord Rudra is born, who is in charge of mode of ignorance or darkness, and he destroys the whole creation by the will of the Lord. So when the Lord desires to annihilate the creation, then Lord Shiva takes up the process and annihilates. So therefore, all these Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva are incarnations of this Garbhodakasaya Vishnu. And from Brahma, the other demigods like Daksha, Marichi, Manu, and many others become incarnated uh, to generate living entities within the universe. They are called Prajapatis because they become the cause of population of the universe. And also, this Garbhodakasaya Vishnu is glorified in the Vedas as the hymns of Garbhastuti, which begin with the description of the Lord as having thousands of heads, etc. So this Garbhodakasaya Vishnu is the Lord of the universe, and although he appears to be lying within the universe, he is a transcendental personality. He is not within the three modes of nature, material nature, but he is transcendental to the three modes of material nature. And also he is known as the super soul of the universal life, and he is known as the maintainer of the universe. Or he is the cause of Kshirodakasaya Vishnu. From Garbhodakasaya Vishnu, the Lord further from Mahavishnu comes Garbhodakasaya Vishnu. He enters into each and every universe. And from Garbhodakasaya Vishnu, he further expands as Kshirodakasaya Vishnu and enters into each and every living entity as Paramatma. So this Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva are qualitative incarnations in charge of different modes of material nature. But Lord Vishnu is non-different from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna himself. Whereas Lord Shiva is in the marginal position between the personality of Godhead and the living entities. He is a Tattva on his own, whereas Brahma is a Jiva Tattva. So the highest pious being is Brahma, and he is empowered to create. Now, Lord Shiva is not an ordinary living being. He is a plenary portion of the Lord. But because he is in direct touch with the material nature, he is not exactly as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the difference is given in the Shastras as the difference between milk and yogurt. Yogurt is nothing but a transformation of milk, but at the same time, it cannot take the position of milk. So milk is compared to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. And when milk is transformed to curd, it is like Lord Shiva. And this universal covering is so thick and so distinct, but still, when Lord Krishna plays his flute, the sound of his flute penetrates all the coverings and surpasses and reaches the spiritual planets. So these demigods are also living entities like us, and they also live in various planetary systems. And when they are in trouble, they also normally get into trouble because, like we see in this earth, also there are so many demons, there are so many demoniac people, so many good people, and they always quarrel between them. So in the heavenly planets also there are fights between the demons and the demigods, and they also get into a lot of trouble. And when they have trouble, they go to the Lord to pray to Lord Vishnu in the shore of Swetadeep, and they recite the Purusha Sukta prayers. We all have heard the name Purusha Sukta. So they recite these prayers and ask for shelter. And then the Lord assures them of protection. So they are just like ministers. In a cabinet, there are so many ministers. They occupy these posts for some time, like ministers occupy for 5 years. These demigods also occupy these posts for a limited period of time until they have the credit in their account. And just like an owner is not involved in a day-to-day basis, not the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he manages these 33 crore demigods and manages the universal affair. But the most important point is that right from the smallest of the demigod to the greatest, everyone is dependent on the Supreme Lord ultimately. So there is a very nice prayer in the Brahma Samhita which says, Siram yata gadi vikara vishesha yoga sanjayate nahi tata prastigasti heto yasham budam abhitata samupaiti karya govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. This Lord Brahma is praying to the Lord where the detail of Lord Shiva is given. Just as milk is transformed into curd by the action of acids, but yet the effect curd is neither same or not different from its cause, that is milk. So I adore the primable Lord Govinda, of whom the state of Shambhu is a transformation for the performance of the work of destruction. So, in a nutshell, Brahma is praying to the Lord in this prayer, as saying as to how milk gets transformed into curd, but at the same time, curd is not milk, but he is offering to the Supreme Lord Govinda, of whom Shambhu is a transformation for the purpose of work of destruction. So the Lord transforms into Lord Shiva for the purpose of destruction. So Lord Shiva is not a second Godhead. Only there is only one supreme personality of Godhead, that is Krishna. So we can't equate Brahma or Shiva to the supreme personality of Godhead. And from Shambhu, there are so many expansions like Rudra and so forth. So I'll skip a few things because for want of time. Similarly, there's another quote in Brahma Samhita where Lord Brahma prays, Vaswan yadashma sagaleshu nijeshu tejas siyam yat prakadayat yapitatva tatro Brahmaye esa jagadanda vidana karta govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. The translation says, I adore the removable Lord Govinda, from whom separated subjective portion Brahma receives his power for the regulation of the mundane world, just as the sun manifests some portion of its own light in all the effulgent gems that bear the names of Suryakanta, etc. So, from the previous sloka, we understand that Lord Shiva is also a transformation of Lord Krishna, but at the same time, he is not God. And here in this sloka, we see that Brahma also gets his powers from Lord Krishna. In other words, Brahma and Shiva also are not independent. They are not independent of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For them to exhibit their capacities or power, they are empowered by the Supreme Lord Krishna himself. So they are not independent. Now I'll come to the third point, from the third sloka. So in the second sloka also there are mention as to how all the planets are heavy with various mountains, seas, oceans, buildings, etc. So all these are existing on the higher planetary systems also. And we go to the third sloka of the day, where it mentions as to how the time factor brings people together and separates them also. Actually, time is an impersonal manifestation of the Supreme Lord himself. The Lord says in Bhagavad Gita, Am kalosmi. That means he says, I am time. So the Lord, time is an expansion of the Lord himself. And this time is eternal. Just like Lord is eternal, the time is also eternal. But in the material world, we see time moving fast. It keeps on moving. We get up in the morning and then we see the time. In one moment, the time has passed. And we cannot bring back that one moment of a second that has passed also. So it is mentioned as to how time creates and time annihilates. And time brings birth and death also. Now, there are some very nice quotes from Srimad Bhagavatam, the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. We find that Bhishma Deva, when he was lying in the bed, actually, this is a very, the last 5 days of the Kartik is called Bhishma Pancha. So, when Bhishma Deva was lying in the bed after he was wounded severely, he gives a quote to Maharaj. Krishna sent Yudhishthira to take instruction from Bhishma Deva. And in his address to Yudhishthira, he says three very important slokas which I picked up. In one sloka in the ninth chapter of first canto, he says, in my opinion, this is all due to inevitable time under whose control everyone in every planet is carried, just as the clouds are carried by wind. That means every living entity in every planet is under the control of this inevitable time. So time controls everything, and time is under the control of the Supreme Lord himself. The Lord can adjust the time whichever way he wants, but time controls this material world. So the entire control is rested in the time factor, right from big planets, including the sun, the force of air, clouds, all are under the control of time. Similarly, time controls even the action of air and other elements. Therefore, everything is under the control of the supreme Kala or time, which is a powerful representation of the Lord within this material world. So therefore, Bhishma Deva says that Yudhishthira should not be sorry for this inconceivable action of time, because everyone has to bear the actions and reactions of time. We all perform karma, and we have to suffer or bear the reactions of each of these karma. So Yudhishthira also, Bhishma Deva says that Yudhishthira also should not lament, because so many of them died in the battlefield, for which Yudhishthira was lamenting. He says, further it is said that the most pious also has to suffer the condition of this material nature. But a pious person, being guided by a bona fide Brahmana or Vaishnava, follows the religious principles. In the next sloka, Bhishma Dev says, "Oh, how wonderful is the influence of inevitable time! It is irreversible. Otherwise, how can there be reverses in the presence of King Yudhishthira, the son of the demigod controlling religion? Bhima, the great fighter with a club, the great bowman, Arjuna with his mighty weapon Gandhiva, and above all, the Lord, the direct well-wisher of the Pandavas." So, in other words, Bhishma Deva is telling Yudhishthira that it is the influence of inevitable time which is irreversible. Time cannot be reversed, and there are so many reverses that the Pandavas went through, and each of them were a great personality, and none other than the Lord himself, who is the well-wisher of Pandavas, were present. But still, they had to go through these so many miseries in their life, and from that, what is to be learned is that material world means only miseries. This is an important lesson that we all have to understand, and it is possible to understand in the human form of life only, that life in the material world is nothing but a struggle. And then in the next sloka, he says, "O king, know from me that..." No, this is a quote. I will skip this because there's no time. But before concluding the class, I will give a quote from the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where Lord Kapila explains to his mother Devahuti, the 30th chapter, first and second sloka. He says, as the personality of God said, as a mass of cloud does not know the power influence of the wind, a person engaged in material consciousness does not know the powerful strength of the time factor by which he is being carried. So one who is engaged in material consciousness, he cannot realize the power of this time factor. And this time factor is carrying a person just like a mass of cloud is carried by the wind. When the wind blows, it carries the clouds also. Similarly, all the living entities like us are carried by the time factor, which we don't realize also. In the next sloka, it says, whatever is produced by the materialist with great pain and labor for so-called happiness, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as the time factor, destroys. And for this reason, the conditioned soul laments. So we all have a lot of hankering, for which we do a lot of struggle in this material world. So what is said here is, whatever is produced by the materialist with great pain and labor for the so-called happiness. That means to try to get happiness, we all struggle with a lot of pain and labor. But what happens? The Supreme Personality of Godhead, as the time factor, destroys everything. And for this, we all lament. This is a condition of all the living entities in this material world. We all have hankering, and then we all lament also. And one more quote before I wind up is that the misguided materialist does not know that his very body is impermanent, and that the attractions of home, land, and wealth, which are in relationship to that body, are also temporary. So out of ignorance only, he thinks that everything is permanent. So we are all misguided living entities. We think everything is permanent. I will live eternally. But we don't know that time is taking us closer to death. And we are going to die one day. And when we die, we have to leave everything, our home, our family, for whom we have struggled very hard. And everything is temporary. Even the home is temporary, the family is temporary, all the wealth that we accumulate is also temporary. But out of ignorance, we think that everything is permanent in this material world. So with this, I conclude the class for the day. For the next 2 minutes or 3 minutes, I can take some questions, some comments that if you have, any of you have. One more point from the last line of the translation of the third sloka. It says that the time brings about the end of the phenomenal world. It carries on the work of creation by bringing one individual into existence from one another. That means we meet, example is given like in the ocean, shore of the ocean, we find sand particles accumulate. And when the wave goes back, all these sand particles are disintegrated. They are not together again. Similarly, we take birth, and then we die also. And when we take birth again, it may not be the same family, it need not be the same father, it may not be the same children. And finally, this sloka says, it dissolves the universe by destroying even the Lord of Death, Yamaraj. So the Lord of Death, Yamaraj, also has to die one day. So this is the material world. Now I can take some questions.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandvat Pranam.
Dandvat Pranam.
Prabhu, one question. After death,
Yes.
the human being immediately start traveling to the higher or lower planet, or how much it takes time to travel to those planets, or is there any temporary halt in between? After that, it is decided which planet he should go. Can you throw more light on that?
Yes, Prabhu. In the sense, I don't have much of detail on this, but the point is that when one leaves the body, there is some time that is given for one to suffer. That period, again, like I said, the time factor is different in the planetary system itself. If somebody is pious, he may have to go, if he goes to a higher planetary system also, it is not that immediately he leaves and goes to the higher planetary system. Some suffering has to take place for whatever sinful activities that has been done. And if the person has been fully pious, he's been wanting to enjoy something in the material world, the Lord may give him a position of a demigod also. But the hellish planets are there where the conditions are totally hellish, which will be discussed in the fifth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So, depending on the planetary system and depending on the form of life, the time factor varies. It's not one common uniform factor, but some time is given for the living entity to undergo the sufferings to a certain extent. It is not that the suffering is fully taken away, but some atonement is there by means of suffering. And there is no clear description, but it is given in the Garuda Purana. But we don't go too much into detail of this. One thing is that here in the purport itself, Srila Prabhupada mentions a devotee does not aspire to get anything in from this material world, knowing well everything is temporary. A devotee aspires to only serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the last line says, this service is existing eternally. That means by constitution we are bound to serve. Either we serve the Lord or serve Maya. Then he says the Lord exists eternally. The servitor exists eternally. That means we live eternally. That means the soul within us lives eternally and the service exists eternally. So devotion service is eternal, we are eternal, Lord is eternal. So the moment we take up this position, understand this constitutional position, and take up to devotion service, we can also live a life of eternity. Instead of trying to desire to enjoy something in this material world, this is the best answer I can give you at the moment because time factor, like I said, varies from planet to planet, universe to universe also. And there are so many planets, so many different forms of life. So each and every form of life has got its own lifespan. And what, who does, how, everything is under the control of time factor.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Dandvat Pranam.
Thank you. Dandvat Pranam. Any other question? Anybody else? So can I take the class as closed? If no questions, no other further questions or comments? Okay, thank you all very much. Grantha Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.